Welcome to our Azure Incident Retrospective. I'm David Steele.
I'm Sami Kuba. We work in the Azure Communications team.
In addition to providing a written post-incident review after major outages, we also now host these retrospective conversations.
You're about to watch a recording of a live stream where we invited impacted customers through Azure Service Health to join our panel of experts in a live Q&A.
We had a conversation about reliability as a shared responsibility. So this includes our learnings at Microsoft, as well as guidance for customers and partners to be more resilient.
We hope you enjoy the conversation that follows. Super. Today's incident, we're going to focus on an issue that involved Azure Data Factory and Azure Logic Apps. There were interruptions that impacted two regions. One of them was West Central US, and the other one was East Asia. Impacted customers for about 11 hours on the 14th of August would have had their pipelines that were delayed or stuck. Some customers would have experienced success with retries, and not everyone. And some pipelines would have been delayed for up to about 2 hours.
Right, so we'll want to delve into all of that. So I'd like to introduce the engineering leaders joining us on our panel today. First up, we have Mario Zimmerman, our Principal Software Engineering Manager from the Azure Data Factory team. Next to Mario, we've got Francisco or Paco Del Moro, our Principal Software Engineer from the Data Factory team. And finally, on the end, we've got Natasha Verma, who's our Partner Software Engineering Manager from the Logic Apps team. And so, Sami, since we're talking about both Data Factory and Logic Apps, maybe we should start to piece those together.
Absolutely. Mario, I was hoping potentially we could start with you. Could you please tell myself, our customers, how Azure Data Factory works with the Azure Logic Apps? Do you take a dependency on there? What's the interaction and what's the relationship like between these two services from a data point of view?
Yeah, and I think today we'll talk a little bit about how Logic Apps impact the Data Factory for this outage. But it is important to understand that Logic Apps' dependence for Data Factory is transparent to Data Factory customers, right? So I think it's going to help us understand what happened and how we're going to prevent this from happening in the future. That's why we're going to go into those details. But we're not expecting customers to need to understand all of that, right? So they take a dependency on Data Factory. This was ultimately a Data Factory problem, right? And we will be working with our partners and making sure that this doesn't happen again, right? We do take a dependence on several different services, Logic Apps being one of them, right? It is a very important dependence for us. We've been partners for a long time, right? In this specific scenario, we had like this outage, but again, we were partnering during the outage, after the outage, and we're going to be working on make sure that this doesn't happen.
Got it. Very good. So we can understand that the relationship there. So Data Factory takes a dependency on Logic Apps. Okay. So if we fast forward to the 14th of August, on the fateful day of this outage, what did customer impact actually feel like? If you were a Data Factory customer, what could you do? What couldn't you do? Did you get errors? Like, what was that pain that was experienced?
Yeah, so I'll jump in for this one. Basically, during those like 12-ish hours, the customers would see their pipelines being stuck. And what that means is that if you have one or n activities, the progress between one activity to the next one will be very, very delayed, right? Like we were seeing delays of to like 2 to 3 hours in between activities themselves, right? So even though the activity actually finished, like for example, if they had a copy activity, the copy would actually happen. We would not mark that as succeeded, and the customer would not see the success or failure until 2 to 3 hours later. Right, so that was what's happening for some of the pipeline runs during the outage.
Okay, so if customers were actually looking in the portal and seeing their individual pipeline runs, it wouldn't have said completed, even though it actually was completed. Got it.
Fascinating. So if we fast forward over to you, we're in the PIR, we mentioned that the trigger event was due to a deployment or an update through Azure Logic Apps. Could you tell us about this Logic Apps update? And one of the things that caught my attention is that we got to 2 regions. Usually I thought with an update, we stage these in regions, but we got to 2 regions. So, I mean, could you tell us a little bit more about your update and also why ADF tripped up because of this update?
Yeah. So as Mario earlier mentioned, all of us are deploying all the time. And for most part, it should be transparent. It should be an event-free thing that we do. Unfortunately, this was not the case. We do follow safe deployment practices when we are deploying. Yes, the fix did make it to 2 regions, but not entirely. In each region, we have rings. We do this so that when we have a regression due to a code change, which was the case in this particular outage, we want to reduce the blast radius. So we try to make sure we deploy to 1 ring, pause, make sure our monitors have a chance, make sure we are studying any anomalies before we proceed. This particular outage was in 1 ring for 2 regions. Of course, this doesn't take away the fact that we did impact customers. And I'm sure we'll talk more about the actual elephant in the room. In this case, it's a monitoring miss on our end for not having detected it soon enough. But coming back to your question, We do deploy multiple regions, but not the full region. We do deploy slices at a time. We did find this issue when the first slice was deployed to.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the part I just wanted to double click on to understand. So we deployed to both regions at the same time, or we deployed to one and there wasn't any signal that there was a problem, so we deployed to the second?
We talk more about the repairs. Even though we deployed one after the other, one of the repairs we plan to take is to pause longer as well.
Just to collect more data, get better signal about the health.
And especially because even though we do our best to find any and every anomaly, bugs slip by.
Sure.
So we are learning, and we'll talk about it more when we cover repairs, that even though we do deploy one at a time, our repair item is to wait longer as well.
Got it. That's helpful.
I do want to add a little bit more in terms of deployment and what are the practices. And these are Microsoft Azure-wide policies on how to deploy, right? We are like ADF, LogicApps are all following that, right? If you think about ADF, for example, we have more than 40 regions, right? And the STP, the safe deployment practice, it doesn't specify that you go one region at a time. I just want to be clear about that as well, right? You do start with one region with Canary, then you go to the next tier. When you get to tier 3, 4, and 5, you do have multiple regions at the same time happening, right? So just to clarify when you're saying like, yes, I wish we had like caught this like even earlier than we did, right? But there will be situations where you have an entire tier being impacted at the same time. That is a possibility, even though we're following safe practices.
So the safe deployment, you can do to multiple regions, but it'll be slices. You don't saturate entire regions at the same time. You do portions of them.
Keep learning,
Okay.
and we keep course correcting. I'm pretty sure, hopefully we'll never have to do this again, but if we do, hopefully we would have made more improvements and deploy them in practice.
And a bit more on even implementation details of the SDP process, right? So your first region, your first tier is a single region, right? Your second tier, you're gonna go to like one small region. For like the third tier, now you're gonna go to like a medium region. And it's actually important that you're not being extremely restricted, right?
Sure.
Because when you are deploying, you actually wanna get those like corner cases, right? So you don't actually benefit from being extremely restricted to one tier in one region. That's actually gonna hurt instead of help, right? We do want to get to a point where we are catching those issues earlier on with the smallest impact possible in the case that we do make a mistake, right? That does not mean one region sequentially 47 regions one after another.
That's really helpful to understand. It's not literally one by one, but it's kind of designed to start small and expand. Okay, that's great context. So Natasha, I want to bring it back to something that you mentioned around the detection miss here, because that's a huge thing for us. Part of the reason that our communications were delayed, part of the reason that our mitigation was delayed is because we didn't catch this early enough. Yeah. And so I know in the learnings and repairs, we'll talk about that, but this was actually raised to us by customers. Customers had to tell us that they were in pain. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, those are the worst kind of outages. But in this particular case, because I think Paco described, the impact was a stuck pipeline, essentially. So nothing was failing. And this is our lesson that you, of course, monitor failure conditions. You have alerts for those. We also monitor performance degradation. But in this particular pattern, the volume of customers that would have seen stuck jobs, because the queue was clearing up in 2 hours.
Sure.
Without going too much into the implementation detail, we do have some fail-safe in the system where stuck jobs do eventually get picked up. So that was also happening. But net is we just didn't have enough confidence in our signal to self-alert.
Sure.
And unfortunately, customers in this particular case had to report it to us.
Got it. Okay, so you're right. We'll get to some of the learnings and repairs about how we're improving our monitoring, but now we're at the part in the story when customers have reported it to us. And so what did we do to go about that? How did we investigate what was happening? And ultimately, how did we mitigate the problem?
I think you should ADF start it.
Let's start there.
Yeah, so we basically got the first incident reported for the customer. And when that happened, it was raised to us. And we got on a bridge, right? First between Azure Data Factory team, and then we were investigating like, okay, what's happening? Like we do see the delays, then where the delay is coming from. And then when we discovered that it was coming from like a partner team, LogicApps, then we engaged with them. They joined the bridge with us, right? And then after that, unfortunately, the detection took a long time.
Right.
The mitigation was really quick, right? As soon as they joined the bridge, right, like we explained, like, hey, this is what we're looking at. We're seeing the pipelines being stuck. This is the reason. And then immediately they jumped and said, like, okay, we believe that this is a code change. We're going to roll back, Right. So
That's
mitigation was fairly quick. It was just the detection that took a really long time.
That's helpful. So Natasha, when we talk about that rollback in the post-incident review, that's a rollback of the recent change that was being rolled out to logic apps, and we have to do that by region. Is that right?
We follow safe deployment practices even for rollbacks.
In reverse.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we did bake between the regions, but we did roll back the most impacted East Asia first.
Okay.
The rollback, as Paco said, was 10 minutes. The challenge is, and that's true for all issues with monitoring misses, we lose a lot of precious time in getting to that point, and then rollback was quick.
But once the issue was understood, then we could pull the lever and roll.
That's correct.
Great.
And in this particular case, we even had a few customers where rollback was not enough because we had a few pipelines stuck for customers that we needed to help jumpstart so they would process fast. So there was a little bit of a lag that teams spent time together. So even though we had mitigated for most of the customers, we had a few customers with a lot of pipelines that we had to help assist so their mitigation was faster because those queues get picked up at a certain cadence and we just needed to help because precious time was lost. We just had to help speed it up.
Natasha, clearly ADF or Azure Data Factory is one of your customers.
Yeah.
Did you have external customer impact as well to this, or was it exclusive? Was external impact only for Azure Data Factory?
We did see impact for Logic Apps customers as well. ADF definitely had outsized impact because the way our services depend on each other, we rely on this one particular trigger, a webhook trigger. That's more a design implementation, but that's the use case that ADF uses our engine on. This particular issue was impacting that trigger. So it did have an outsized impact on ADF, but yes, Logic Apps customers were impacted too.
Okay, great. That's good to understand. So
as we do pivot to learnings and repairs, you mentioned you're going to change the way you do deployments.
In this particular case, yes. We have quite a laundry list of repairs. The first one is how to detect this issue.
Okay.
For example, as I mentioned, we have signals for failure cases. We have signals for performance degradation. But we are going to try to see if we can add a signal, synthetically create validation for this signal and have a signal that alerts us on an outage for this as well. So yes, detection is our biggest repair. And then in addition, we also were brainstorming, had we stayed longer in a region, earlier regions, maybe we would have given it more time for customers to tell us if things still slip by.
Okay, so we can improve some monitoring and we can maybe tweak some of the way that safe deployment rolls out. Mario, are there learnings and repairs from Data Factory when it comes to monitoring, catching this early?
Yeah, I think ultimately we want something like this not to happen, obviously, right? And again, preventing the regression from going forward is obviously our first goal. Having said that, quick detection here would have had tremendous impact. You know, if instead of having like 1 or 2 hours of delays, our customers had like a few minutes, still no one wants to have delays, but that's acceptable in a bad service, right? So we do have a big focus here on detection, right? And with that, being able to quickly mitigate, right? Natasha was saying that the impact on Logic Apps customers was small, like Paco was explaining how those were delays, right? I think something that we've been working on for a while, and it's a goal for us, is to be able to correlate the impact that we are seeing on Logic Apps to ADF customers, right? So this isn't as simple as Logic Apps is going to detect or ADF is going to detect, right? What we need here is like data to be produced on the Logic App side, sent to us, then we know how those workflows correlate to each one of the factors. Then we're able to actually understand that like some of these customers are having impact, right? So this is a true cross-team detection, right? Which isn't simple, but to avoid something like this is what we have to do, right? So.
But you touched on the idea of synthetics and changing some of the synthetics. When I think about synthetic workloads, is it a case of cat and mouse? Do I always need to update synthetics, or is it a case of we capture 90% and there's a few edge cases, or is it a case of no, yearly we have to create new styles of workloads because customers use our products in weird and wonderful ways?
I think we frankly pick the monitor that makes more sense for the cases. In this particular pattern, we definitely feel a synthetic would have helped, because all synthetic is a test case we have deployed in production, a logic app that simulates the environment scenario we want to test, and then we are pinging it. And the hope is our pinger would fail and give us the same error that the customers would have seen, And if we see enough of those, we are getting ourselves on the bridge and investigating why. So in this particular case, this would have been avoided, known in minutes, had we simulated this in production.
Cool. That's great to understand. So we've covered a bunch of different learnings here. We've got monitoring and alerting to catch it sooner. We've got some changes to the rollout procedures to have some more bake time. And we've got potentially some better testing and synthetics to help be the canary down the coal mine there. That's really good to understand. In the same way that we look at how us as Microsoft could have learned from outages, we also like to take the view from the customers, right? Obviously, building reliable apps on Azure is a shared responsibility. So I'm interested from both the Data Factory perspective and the Logic Apps perspective, were there things that customers could do to be more resilient to this, right? Like we've mentioned only just a couple of regions that were impacted. Can customers build multi-region data factories? And like, what would we recommend for customers to help weather the storm?
First of all, I hate to put this responsibility on the customer, right? So obviously, we're starting from a point here where those things should not happen. The customer shouldn't have to worry about that, right? Having said that, sometimes they do happen, right? And when we are talking about safe deployment practices, one of the key here is that we never deploy two paired regions together. They're always on separate tiers, right? And yes, for ADF specifically, we do have disaster recovery document that's published, and it explains how you can have data factors created in like paired regions, right? Again, for customers that follow the guidance and have factories in multiple regions, they could have transitioned to the secondary, to the paired region, and that region was not impacted.
That's great to understand. And I like your caveat there to say, hey, look, generally speaking, this is on us. But if we know that customers are building something that's super mission critical, there is ways that you can make sure that your boat is big enough that even a single region having a problem won't bring you down. And Natasha, for Logic Apps, is it the same? Can customers choose to architect their Logic Apps across multiple regions?
Yep, we have similar guidance where we suggest, based on your load and how critical it is, either an active-active or an active-passive version deployed in different regions. Because if you have some sort of a front end, either an APIM or ADF or AFD, then you can basically just avoid your customers from getting impacted.
Got it. I'm going to try to translate here. APIM is API Manager, and AFD is Azure Front Door.
Yeah.
Great. I'll look out for acronyms. Okay, that's great to understand. So we've got lots of learnings on our side, and then there was some things customers could have done. Great. I've saved my last question for my co-host, Sammy. Sammy runs the Azure Communications team, so I'm interested, how did we do? Did we keep customers up to date during this outage? Any learnings from a comms perspective?
Overall, not great. I think our comms summary was, because of the delay in detection and engagement from the engineering teams, our first communication took about 8.5 hours. We communicated to Azure Data Factory customers. We did call out that this was reported by customers, so we called out the failure in our monitoring and our alerting. We did tell customers that retries should be okay, and some customers might succeed after that. We did, on the second update, which came about 2 hours later, we gave some details about what we're doing with the rollback. We didn't speak so much about the dependency on Logic Apps. And about 20 minutes before mitigation, we did tell customers, hey, we're about to be mitigated, and so on. But the problem is for an 11-hour outage, customers got 2, and I'm going to call it a half update because it came just before mitigation. And I think one of the things we want to do is tell customers where we are. We want to give them insight into the bridge and let them know what we're doing so that they can trust that we have, the best people on this and we're working hard and shine a light on all the activity that's going on. And I don't think we lived up to that mark. So we have a better job to do. The delay obviously didn't help, but once we were there, we could have spoken a little bit more about what we're doing and the repairs that we're making. And it may not change the situation for customers, but at least customers kind of know what's going on, and there's a little bit of relief from that. So
yeah, that's great to understand. I mean, we know the cloud can't be a black box, and so the more transparent we can make those updates, the better. Please.
If I could add something to that, I keep insisting on the detection and therefore the mitigation, right? It also applies to communication, right? The fact that we didn't detect that fast enough, the fact that we didn't know exactly the impact because we didn't have the detection, right? It all contributes to communication not being great, right? Obviously, our goal is to have automatic detection, automatic communication, right? And this is also something we're working on when we talk about improving monitoring for this.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. We've talked in some of these sessions about onboarding scenarios to brain so that communications don't need to wait for a person to wake up and splash water on their face and send a communication manually. Eventually, with time, more and more scenarios can happen automatically. Yeah, that's great to understand. Thank you for watching this Azure Incident Retrospective.
At the scale of which our cloud operates at, incidents are inevitable.
Just as Microsoft is always learning and improving, we hope our customers and partners can learn from these too and provide a lot of reliability guidance through the Azure Well-Architected framework.
To ensure that you get posted incident reviews after an outage, and invites to join these live stream Q&A sessions, please ensure that you have Azure Service Health Alerts set up.
We really focused on being as transparent as possible and showing up and being accountable after these major incidents.
Whether it's an outage, a security, or a privacy event, Microsoft is investing heavily in these events to ensure that we earn, maintain, and at times rebuild your trust. Thanks for joining us.